In the Pacific Highway site, I've created the basic HTML structure for index.html. It's time to replace all this placeholder text with some real content, and you can find the content in the folder for this lesson in the basic page layout folder of the course assets. There are two versions. There's one in a Word document, the other one is in rich text format in case you don't have Microsoft Word on your computer. In this lesson, I'm also going to show you how to create some basic styles and attach an external JavaScript file to ensure that Internet Explorer 8 and earlier apply the styles correctly to the HTML5 structural elements. So let's get to work. I've opened highway.docx. Let's bring that in, and I'm going to select the main heading here, copy it to my clipboard, and then go back to Dreamweaver, select the placeholder text in the header, and then Control-Shift-V on Windows, Command-Shift-V on a Mac for Paste Special. In the Paste Special dialog box, make sure that the third radio bullet is selected. Click OK, and that's brought in the heading and formatted it correctly as a level 1 heading. If you're using the rich text format, you'll have to put your cursor somewhere inside the heading and then use the format menu in the property inspector to convert it to heading 1, because it will be brought in as a paragraph. So back to Word, and this time select these bullet points, copy them, back to Dreamweaver, select the placeholder text for main nav, Paste Special, click OK, and it's brought it in as an unordered list. Again, on rich text format, you'll have to select all the paragraphs and then use the unordered list icon in the property inspector to convert it. I won't go through all the other elements because the process is exactly the same: copy and paste special. What I want to do now is to add an external style sheet. So I'm just going to close the Files panel, and the CSS Designer panel, click the plus button in the Sources pane and select Create New CSS File. Browse, make sure that I'm in the site root, and then what we need to do is to create a new folder called Styles. Open the folder, and then in there create a file called highway.css. Save, and then OK. Now this web page uses HTML5 structural elements, which not all browsers yet understand. So what we need to do is to create a style rule that will tell older browsers to make the HTML5 structural elements display as a block. And rather than doing that in the CSS Designer panel, it's easier to go directly into the style sheet. So click highway.css in the Related Files toolbar, and that opens the style sheet. What we need to do is to create a selector, a group selector for the HTML5 elements. So type article followed by a comma, aside, comma, header, comma after each one, footer, nav, figure, and then finally section. And after that, an opening curly brace, and press enter or return. Dreamweaver displays code hints. Start typing DIS for display, press enter or return. That gives you a colon followed by some more code hints for the values. The value we want is block. As soon as you press BL, you get block. Press enter or return, and then a semicolon at the end of that line, enter or return again, and a closing curly brace. And then just add a new line at the end so that the next style's formatted correctly on the next line. So let's add a little bit more in the way of styles, but we'll do this time in the CSS Designer panel. We need to go into Design View, CSS Designer, select highway.css, and you can see that it's already listing that group rule that we created. Click the plus button, and create a style rule for body. Then go to the text section by clicking the T icon there, and we're going to make the color #202020, and the font family, we'll select Gill Sans MT, that font stack there. Next I want to style the headings, so click the plus button again, H1, H2, H3 with a comma between each one, and set the color to #577A 99. And I'm going to change the font family, but I'm going to use an Edge web font, so to avoid a flash of unstyled text, create a new selector, and that will be .wf-active space H1, comma, and then the same for the H2 and H3. And we can select the font family, and it'll be Css Sans Pro, which is an Edge web font. The font weight automatically switches to 200. We want to change that to 600, which is semi-bold. Now for the main heading, new selector, just simply H1, and we'll set the font size to pixels, 48 pixels, and text align to center. To style the first word of the heading separately, select it, right click, wrap tag, and then select span. And then we need to create a style rule for the span, so select highway.css. The selector will be period wf-active space h1 space span. And then in the text section we need to change the font family to Caution Script, which is an Edge web font, which is why I've used the wf-active class. Now the final thing to do is to attach a special script to the page so that Internet Explorer 8 and earlier interpret the styles correctly on the HTML5 elements. So click Source Code, and then just before the closing head tag on line 10, click so that your insertion point is there. Then the Insert menu, select Script, and then go to the Scripts folder and select HTML5 shiv.js. This attaches that JavaScript file that persuades Internet Explorer 8 and earlier to recognize HTML5 elements and to style them correctly. And we need to clean up this Edge font script by going to Commands and clean up Web Fonts script tag. And that has removed the 200 font weight for Css Sans Pro. Doing so just makes our web page that more efficient. So once you've copied and pasted the text in place of these placeholders, you're ready to go. You've added content to the HTML structure, you've attached an external style sheet and created some basic styles, and you've also attached an external JavaScript file that will ensure that Internet Explorer 8 and earlier apply styles correctly to the HTML5 structural elements.